Hi, I am Doreen Tannenbaum, the Strategic Initiatives and Communications Manager with UCI's Procurement Services, and welcome to our Department Buyer Training session covering changes in Sales and Service Agreement. And this presentation is going to be followed with an open forum and Q&A. The recording of today's session, along with the slide deck, will be sent out via email and available on our Procurement Services website by the end of next week. You can find training on our website. At the top of our procurement website, we have actually added this section right there. And you can also find interactive training courses on UCLC. And if you're looking to have a one-on-one or a group training session for your department, you can contact Shauna Neiswanger at shauna.n@uci.edu if you need any further assistance. I did want to introduce a training event that we have coming up hosted by UCOP for the Small Business First Supplier IO training. Please register. It is on Wednesday, March 30th from 11 o'clock to noon. You can register through the bit.ly link, which I'll also drop into the chat box. And thank you. I'd now like to turn it over to Snehal Bhatt, our Chief Procurement Officer.
Thank you, Doreen. Good afternoon, everybody. It's very nice of you all to take time from your busy schedules to participate in this training session. More than training, this is more of informative session where we would like to provide you with more insights and information of what procurement's doing, any changes that are happening in different areas of procurement. And so for today's topic, we are going to talk about some of the changes that are coming in the sales and service process. And this probably does not apply to many of you who might only be doing purchases, but I would hope that you have folks in your departments who also are providing services to outside companies. And sales and service is the process that we are supposed to follow and execute an agreement to provide services to an outside firm. So we hope that you'll find this insightful. If there are others in your department who actually handle these activities, we will greatly appreciate if you would forward the link to the training session, today's training, to those folks so that they also get familiar with what we discussed today and what we shared, okay? At the end of the session, as Doreen said, we would like to open it up for any other questions you may have related to this particular topic or any other topic in general where you have any questions that you would like answered in terms of any procurement activities. We probably will have the time to answer your questions. So before we go through the changes in the sales and service process, I really wanted to reiterate and emphasize, share with you all what exactly is the vision and mission of procurement services. For many of you who may have been here long enough, you may have heard this before, but because we know that there is a lot of turnover happening all the time, there could be new folks who have not attended the training sessions in the past. And so I just wanted to share with everybody what is the vision and mission of procurement services. So essentially, our vision is to lead the community as strategic partners. And our goal is to provide innovative solutions aligned with UCI's brilliant future. Many times you may not find that we are being innovative, but it is our attempt all the time to try to be innovative and try to come up with solutions to meet the needs of the campus. And so our mission is really to partner with all of you to provide excellent customer service. That's our motto, is to be the best we can in providing you with a good customer service. And the way we can do that is to collaborate with you, help work together to innovate our processes. And we would hope that our team actually does have the expertise that we can bring to you and share some of the best practices that happen across the UC system or in the industry as a whole. And so that's our goal, is to continuously improve our processes, do technology enhancements, bring value, and be of service to you all, get what you need. For those who may or may not be aware, these are the various areas that fall under procurement services. So we have the sourcing and procurement organization that's led by Sarosh Sarksigan-Korea, who helps with all the RFPs, processing of the POs for all the goods. We have the PAL card team led by Jennifer Che, do an awesome job of helping everybody. And we have more than 1,500 PAL cards that we have issued to the campus that we try to help them utilize and get their small dollar purchases. The contract services team led by Andrew Calderon really helps with all the service contracts, all the sales and service agreements, and all the other miscellaneous agreements that the departments need with their counterparts. Equipment management is led by Helen Chang, and they handle all the purchases for all assets that are basically supposed to be reported and tracked that are over $5,000. So they manage all the inventory for the campus and the medical center, and also handle all the surplus sales and features exchange. Strategic initiatives and communication is led by Doreen Tannenbaum, and her team basically works on all the small business programs, the sustainability programs, and also manages our website and other initiatives that we may be having within procurement. And lastly, we do have, and not the least, we have trademarks and strategic contracts led by Hung Pham, who also reports into procurement. And he's the one who handles all the promotional items and the licensees that we use to buy promotional items. So I just wanted to kind of give everybody a highlight of those that may have been new to the organization and may not be familiar with what procurement services does. Okay, now this is where you all come in. I wanted to make sure that you all get familiar with what is it that you are responsible for and you need to be mindful of. Obviously, you all need to know what you want to purchase. Probably the purchase and the purpose for your purchase may not be something that you may be familiar with, but if you are going to be helping write any agreements, it might be beneficial for you to understand why it's needed and by when you want it. So you are our conduit to the academic folks and the PIs who might be asking you to help procure things. We want to make sure that you are kind of familiar with things that they want, because you would need to then feed that to us for us to help you make those purchases. So, the first few ones are like when, why, where, how. And again, payment methods is very important. You need to know how you plan to pay for the goods or the services that you're going to be acquiring. And most importantly, you should be familiar with some of the policies that we have in place so that you know what kind of documents are going to be required for that purchase, so that we don't come at the last minute and say, hey, by the way, you're missing this document. And that's typically why things get delayed. So it will be beneficial for you all to be aware of the requirements for the various purchases. Just want to make sure everybody understands that the fiscal officer in your units should be approving any of the expenses. Even if the PI says, hey, I want to get this and use my funds, startup funds, the fiscal officer still needs to be made aware of it, and they need to make sure that they are approving these expenses. And also, you need to be aware of where you're keeping all your receipts and your documentations. So again, as I said, it would be beneficial for you all to be aware of the various policies that we need to be complying with. We have, obviously, as a public university, we have mandates from the state. Any federal purchases requires us to follow the federal policies. And of course, UC itself has their own policies. So the key document that our process is governed is by UCOP BUS 43. UCI has its own 707-10, which is for procurements of goods and services. UCI 701-23 actually is the sales and service policy. So if you all have been helping provide services to external clients and customers, it might benefit for you to just kind of browse through this policy 701-23 and familiarize yourself with that. Obviously, the California Public Contracts Code, which is the one that requires us to do competitive bidding for any purchases over $100,000. That's where that comes from. Uniform guidance is where the federal fund policies come in, and small business first is a UC policy, and covered services, again, is a UC policy that we are required to follow. Last but not the least, I just wanted to make sure that everybody needs to recognize that the departments do not have the delegated authority to purchase or sign any documents. The delegated authority for the signatory authority for any purchases and any agreements lies with procurement services. So please make sure that your departments don't sign the agreements and start acquiring the goods or services. Okay, so I'll just answer Marbell's question about 701-23. That is for sales and service agreements. So if you are going to be providing any services to an external company, and that's what we are going to cover today. So Andrew is going to speak about the sales and service contracts and agreements, and that is governed by 701-23. And now I would like to introduce Andrew Calderon, who is the Procurement Contracts Manager, to introduce his team and walk us through the intent of sales and service, and then I will briefly touch on some of the changes that are coming.
Thank you, Snehal. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to come and join you and share some of the exciting and wonderful news in relation to contracts, right? Says no one, right? Well, nonetheless, they're a necessary component of having to deal with not just procurement side, but also the sales and service side. Joining and rounding out my team are Laura Moss, Andrew Lim, and Sheila Thomas. If you've handled sales and service previously, or if you've been involved in a procurement of a specialized service, probably worked with one of us. Getting to know our team, we obviously want to be able to do that and serve your departments well. So as I'll explain later in the presentation, when you submit the sales and service agreement, new sales and service agreement, it'll be handled on a rotating basis by one of us. So you won't necessarily work with any one particular team member, but we all, again, want to provide that same great service. In getting into what sales and service is, if you've done a procurement of a service, you'll know that in that relationship, UCI is the purchasing party, and we are expecting our vendor or contractor to provide us with goods, services, or IT. Sales and service is the flip side of that coin. Instead of UCI paying for someone else's service, we are actually the supplier, and we are the service provider, and the client selected by the department is the one who will eventually pay UCI for that service. It's important to note that much like procurement, right, there is an approval process for conducting sales and service activities. And that approval runs through the Accounting and Fiscal Services Office. They are the ones who ensure that the activity is approved to be sales and service, which is where we provide it to an external entity, not necessarily an internal entity, right? If you're providing services to another UCI department, that would be a recharge activity, not going to be impacted by the sales and service activity. Likewise, if you're providing services to another UC campus, that's likewise considered recharge, not sales and service. The emphasis on sales and services that you're providing a service or goods to an external non-UC affiliated entity. And next slide, please. So some of the key features of sales and service is that UCI is providing a standardized good or service to the non-UC entities at an established price. One-off, there are situations where we might have a one-off activity where we're providing services one time or providing goods one time. If that occurs, we can escalate it to Accounting and Fiscal Services for their review and approval to determine whether, again, it fits within sales and service policy. Likewise, when we provide those goods and services, we don't want to be in competition with a private commercial business, right? Our goal as UCI is not to compete with private businesses. It's to provide a unique service that we are able to do because we are a large research university. The process for proceeding with sales and service activity is first to submit an activity information worksheet to Accounting and Fiscal Services for their approval. Once you obtain that approval, you don't need to get an activity information worksheet for each and every contract. That activity information worksheet covers the same service that you might offer to a multitude of clients. Those activity information worksheets are good for 5 years. So again, you don't need to apply and obtain it for each and every sales and service contract that you obtain. When you are ready to proceed, when you've identified a client, you can fill out the sales and service agreement template that's on our website under the contracts form page. We'll provide a link at the end. Together with your activity information worksheet, send an email to the contracts@uci.edu box, and then the assigned team member will work with you to both edit the document, get it ready for execution, and then routing for final execution. It is really important to note, much like procurement, right? When you go out and procure a good or service, you must obtain a purchase order or purchase agreement approved by procurement services ahead of you receiving that service. In the same way, when you provide an external good or service to an entity, you need to obtain Accounting and Fiscal Services approval to be a sales and service unit, and you must obtain an executed contract by procurement services before you begin rendering services or providing goods to that outside entity. So now go ahead, Snehal's going to go ahead and go over some of the more recent changes to the sales and service process and some of the new policies that are coming into play.
Thank you, Andrew. So I want you all to recognize that these activities do get audited. And recently, there was an audit that was performed by our internal auditors on the entire financial services organization. And they are the ones who actually are responsible for receiving any of these payments for the services we will be providing. So there were quite a few findings actually during this whole audit process. And one of the things that was highlighted was some of the gaps and missing process steps in our accounts receivable process. And so there is now a new policy that is being introduced for non-student accounts receivable management policy. And that policy number is going to be 704-15. That policy is about to be rolled out. That's been finalized and approved by the executives. And once it goes into effect, we will send out a link to that policy for everybody to review. Some of the key changes or key elements that you all need to be aware of when it comes to sales and services is that there have been instances that they have found where the department provided services and never actually collected the payments. There were also instances when the customer actually was not able to make payments for the services that were rendered. So one of the things that has been introduced in that policy is for those organizations that are not automatically extended a credit, the department will be required to perform creditworthiness for those organizations. So the ones that actually do have the exemption from needing to do credit checks is state and federal agencies, foundations, educational institutions, medical facilities, and museums. These are the institutions that have been excused from a credit check. And many of our sales and service activities do happen with this institution. So in those situations, we don't need to worry about doing a credit check. But for some other institutions that may not be as large, like the Fortune 500s or the pharmaceutical companies that we do business with, we know that they probably have a very good standing. And so you may not need to perform the credit check. But there are many instances when we actually do work for some of the smaller startup companies. And for those situations, the departments will be asked to perform a credit check. One of the suggestions is to use DNB, Dun and Bradstreet, to perform the financial credibility of the company to make sure that they are financially viable and will be able to pay us for the services we provide to them. So, keep that in mind, because that's a new thing that's coming up, and every department who is providing services to some of these smaller companies may need to do some checks to make sure that they actually are financially viable. The other change that's coming is that all the invoices must be created using the campus billing system online system, the CBSO system. Now, I know that we have been having many of the departments starting to use CBSO for invoicing, but at the point when this policy goes into effect, every department will have to generate invoices using the CBSO system. Now, financial services is going to provide training. So they are going to set up some training sessions to help educate everybody on how actually to use the CBSO system and generate invoices in CBSO. Also, the payments. I know that many departments prefer to receive the checks directly into their departments and deposit into their accounts. Well, that's going to change, because all the payments now must be sent to central cashiering for them to deposit it into the account that you have created when you generate the invoice. So that's another change that the departments will have to get used to. If you're having difficulties with collections of unpaid charges, financial services actually will be tracking it on a monthly basis and help you assist with the collection of these unpaid charges. Also, because you are going to be using the CBSO system, and it's a very old and antiquated system, and we all recognize that. And I think we are going to also use the ARC system, the ARC system, the accounts receivable system. There are some minor changes to the template for the sales and service agreement, especially in the statement of work section, to match with what the fields are in the system that we are required to enter. So we are modifying the form to line up with the system so that when you kind of enter the information in the statement of work, it's the same information that the system is going to ask for. So it makes it easier for you to just kind of enter it in the system and not have to wonder and try to figure out what maps with what. So I'll let Andrew walk you through the changes to the sales and service statement of work template.
Thank you again, Saul. If you've filled a sales and service template out previously, you'll know that primarily the fields that you must complete are located on the Exhibit A statement of work. And that, for the most part, won't change. There might be some basic entries on the face page of the agreement, such as the client's name and the dates of service. Primarily, though, you will be going to the Exhibit A statement of work to begin completing the agreement. Most of the information is simply informational. We need the contact information for the client and their representatives, how we can get in touch with them, including their business address, telephone numbers, emails, and their billing address if it's different. In addition, we need to know which department is providing the service. So you'll need to fill out your area's department name, again, address, contact information, etc. The statement of work section 2, section 2, where we need to describe the work will not change. The scope, the description of the deliverables, any other information that you have related to the service or to the goods being provided will remain the same as you've done in the past. Then going to the last section where you fill out the fees and payment schedule, there will actually be less information that you'll need to fill out, simply because some of that is going to be pre-populated based on the needs that we had to change the methods based on this audit finding. Whatever your fees are or your fee schedule is, provide as much detail as possible. Whether you're asking the client to pay upfront or a deposit upfront, or whether you just simply plan to bill the client on a monthly basis with invoices due at net 30 is going to be generally the standard. Once you've filled out that information, then again, you'll want to take that together with your activity information worksheet, send it to the contracts@uci.edu mailbox, and then one of our team members will assist you in completing it. If you have any questions while you're filling out the form and you're not sure what information needs to be included, again, feel free to email the contracts box and we'll be happy to help you.
Yeah, if you go back during one slide, I want to emphasize that at the very bottom, you will see that there is a number that is going to be assigned to each and every sales and service agreement. So it is very important that you work through the contracts team to generate that number that then you need to make sure is included on the invoice, and so that the payments, when they are received, we know what service and what agreement those payments need to be invoiced against. So please make sure that you do that when you submit your invoices. Okay, so that's also a very important aspect that needs to now be in place for any services we are going to provide. Thank you, Doreen. So those were all the changes that are coming. Not too many, nothing that you need to get alarmed with, except for a few that I'm going to recap just so that you all can hear it again and keep in mind as you start working on any of the sales and service agreements. As Andrew mentioned, you need to make sure that you execute the agreement prior to actually providing any services to any of your clients. I'm finding invariably when I'm asked to sign the agreements that the date for the contract is invariably in the past. That is one cultural shift that needs to happen. The policy 701-23 clearly states that the services should only be rendered after a fully executed agreement is in place. So if we need to follow that and go by the policy, it is imperative that you get the services executed prior to providing the services. I, in fact, just had a conversation with internal audit this week, and it is very likely that internal audit is going to actually audit some of the departments who may not be getting the agreement executed prior to providing the services. So I'm just giving everybody a heads up to make sure that you change the business practices and the culture to try and get these agreements executed prior to you starting to provide the services. I know that we do have certain services that we provide on a very regular ongoing basis, and those are the ones where I invariably see that the services have already started back in January or in November or December, and I see the agreements for execution and signatures in February, March, and stuff of that nature. In fact, I have sometimes seen agreements that are coming to me for signatures for services that had happened 6 months ago. And that is absolutely a no-no. So please, I cannot emphasize enough that you need to start executing the agreements prior to providing the services. I think I already emphasized enough about the invoices being created in CBSO, creditworthiness check. All the payments now will be going to financial services office, and they will be depositing the checks in the accounts that you have set up. And again, start utilizing the revised template for statement of work in the sales and service agreement. So in order for you to always be making sure that you are using the latest template, please use the website and go to the link on our website to pull the agreements and then draft them or fill them in. Don't save them in your workstations and try to use them because they could be obsolete and out of date. And we may not catch those things when you are sending it to us that this is not the latest version. We cannot be reviewing every line item and everything in the contract to make sure that it's the latest version. So please try to use the link on our website whenever you are trying to draft a sales and service agreement. So that was what we wanted to share with you today as a recap on sales and service agreement changes. Here are some of the resources that we talked about. You can click on any of these links to go and review them. You will be receiving this deck of slides. So you will have access to all these links. You can go ahead and click on those, get yourself familiar with that. And as I mentioned, the 704-15 is in the process of getting published. And we will incorporate that in one of our upcoming newsletters once the policy has been released. So you all have a link to that as well. Having said that, we do appreciate everybody taking the time to fill in a survey using this link so that we can do better going forward. We are always looking to improve ourselves and do better and better. So unless you provide us with any feedback on how we can make ourselves better, we cannot help you and become better. So please take the time to provide us with your feedback and let us know, good, bad, or ugly, how we are doing and what can we do to make your life a lot easier when you want to provide services or receive goods and services. With that, we will open up the floor for any questions. And the questions can be related to sales and service, or it can be related to any other topics that you may have questions on or would like us to elaborate on. Today, we do have time to really dive into any questions that you may be having. So I think there are some questions in the chat, Doreen.
One of the questions we had was, is the sales and service being separated from recharge activity completely?
Yes, it has always been separate. They never should be intermingled. In fact, there is a separate policy for recharge activities. I believe it's 701-22, but don't quote me on that. But there is a separate policy for recharge activities and one for sales and service. So you may be providing the exact same services to an internal UCI department and to an external customers. But when you are doing that, you have to treat them completely different because the rates that you apply for an external company are different than those that you would apply to an internal UCI organization. So that's why you have to keep it separate.
Snehal, so just to clarify my question, when we do reporting on recharge activity, we also do reporting on sales and service. In our annual recharge review, we have to report on that and we have to get those rates approved every year. So is that going to be the same, or is it going to be separate reports now?
No, there is no need for you to do anything separate. You can still continue to do the same that you do.
Okay,
so in terms of reporting, you can do it the way you have done in the past.
Okay, so that's not changing.
Correct.
This is just for the actual execution of the services and things like that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're most
And
welcome.
then our next question is there a dollar threshold?
There is no dollar threshold when it comes to sales and service.
Hi, Snehal. My question about the
Hi.
dollar threshold had to do with the creditworthiness.
Yes.
Extending credit, is anything under $1,000 we don't have to worry about, or?
Yeah, so that we discussed that and we said, do we need to put a threshold or say that anything over, let's say $5,000, is worth doing a credit check on? But I guess when you look at it from an auditor's perspective, it's like, even if it's $1,000 service, the fact of the matter is that university resources were exhausted or utilized to provide that service, even if it was for $1,000, and we incurred an expense that the university expects to be paid for. So that's why we did not put any threshold and said that, and we are really relying on the departments to be mindful of it. It's, we are not, it's a recommended activity. It's not a mandated activity, but you want to be careful. And I am sure the departments, as they work with customers, will know which ones are on solid grounds and have good financial backing or record versus those that may not have that sound financial structure and they'll not be financially stable. So I think in about a year we will find out, as we start rolling this out and doing these checks, what's working and what's not working. And if adjustments need to be made, we will do it as we go.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes. And I want to add, the contracts team is terrific. I love working with Andrew and Shelia and Laura. They're the best. So
thank you. Now you're making my life difficult now. They will be expecting raises from me.
The hell, we all expect raises. So.
Tricia, the check is in the mail.
Thank you. I do have one more comment about invoices. Oftentimes the vendor or who we're selling our services to only has one address in their accounts payable system. So checks float all over the place. And we can only hope that the invoice number is on the check to try and track it. I know you wanted to see the agreement on the check, the agreement number. The only place we put the agreement number is on the invoice itself. We're lucky to get the invoice number on a check. So
I agree. It's not easy. And yeah, but that's where then, there's the struggle of figuring out, okay, now who does it, is it for, where does it go? And, that's the additional burden that falls on accounts receivable to figure out where should we be depositing that. That's why it would be nice if on the checks in the memo section, they would just put in the agreement number. Then it becomes very easy for somebody to deposit. I mean, when we submit our checks for utilities installed, they always say, please put your account number or something on the checks. So it's easy for them to track. So same thing, I understand that it's not going to happen all the time, but if you can make it happen most of the time, I think financial services will appreciate it.
Actually have another, sorry.
No worries. No, great. Because I was just going to say, I don't have any other questions. So feel free to bring up any other questions regarding procurement, not necessarily sales and service. So go ahead,
I actually had another question about invoicing because our recharge activity, and I would be actually interested to know if my department's on that audit list. But our recharge activity involves outside sources and internal, and our invoicing is all the same. Like I had to develop my own invoicing system. With the university billing system, I'm assuming that is just for SSA invoicing. And so now those would have to be separate as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions?
Are the rates, so the rates that are those going to have to be aligned with the rates that are approved through the recharge operation, or are those can those be separate?
So both the recharge rates and the sales and service agreement, sales and service rates are both being reviewed and approved by cost accounting and the same person, right? You deal with Maria all the time.
Maria, yeah.
Right. So she is doing both.
Okay.
So yeah, from that perspective, you'll continue to do what you have been doing all along. There is no change to that process.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I know I have a lot of questions.
Please. That's
we
what
have a really long-standing recharge unit, so I just.
Well, that's why we have our open forum. I do have a question in the chat box though, from Jessica. If departments have license agreements and are receiving reoccurring payments directly, With this charge, should payments be transitioned to go directly to cashiering office? Currently, there are no invoices sent. Payment is expected based on the executed agreement.
Yeah, very good question, Jessica. So for lease agreements where you're receiving, let's say, rent payments, don't change anything, continue to operate the way you're operating. Because we don't even, in fact, actually execute a sales and service agreement. That's a lease agreement, which is different from sales and service agreement. So continue to operate your lease agreements the way you have been doing. And there's no need to send invoices on a monthly basis.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. If nobody else has any questions for procurement, I'll be amazed.
See, we all deserve raises.
Yes, as Andrew said, the check's in the mail.
Could I please ask a question about onboarding vendors?
Yes, please.
Okay, and I do have to say as well, as Patricia had mentioned, that the whole team is very supportive. And to me, I always think of it in this light. The university has exponentially grown. Departments have been added. Schools have been built, pharmacy, and still it seems like the staff is so small in comparison to the scope of like the large amount of work that continues to grow at UC Irvine. I mean, we just see it, especially visiting the page, how much money is being processed at your end. So thank you so much for your end. I wanted just to get this is more an observation. So I was processing a vendor invoice. A vendor had been uploaded, so the vendor had provided an invoice. I was processing the information and I noticed that the invoice wasn't correctly completed. So I had reached out to the vendor, and the number that was listed on the invoice was not a number that was being answered. So I tried several times. So finally what I did is I looked up the address that was on the invoice, and there was a number associated to that address on the website. So not the specific company's website, but on Google, let's say. And so I called the number. What was really interesting to me is that the person that answered said that they were not affiliated with the company, but that they mailed out product for this person, or well, it was a company because they were listed as a company. So to me, it was a little bit interesting. And I was thinking like, well, how much should I pursue this further? Because that was not, I thought that this was their company that had been onboarded. So I wanted to know more of the role that your team plays at that end, when onboarding vendors. And do you actually follow, what is the process? And what should the diligence do at our part be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll try to answer it to the best of my abilities. We do not, vendor onboarding is not part of procurement services. It falls under accounts payable actually, and they are the ones who manage the accounts, the onboarding of the vendors, but we work very closely with them. So I will try to answer your question exactly to what you just said. That does seem to be a little suspicious, and I would actually reach out to accounts payable and let them know that, hey, we have this supplier that we are trying to track the invoice, and looks like, and this is not uncommon, where somebody who has a private business might be having a third party who actually does the processing of their invoices and receipt of all the payments. But I would still work with accounts payable to verify and make sure that the supplier is a proper, good supplier. In fact, that's the reason why we switched from our vendor onboarding system to go to Payment Works, because now in Payment Works, they are actually supposed to validate and verify the supplier before we fully complete the onboarding. Sometimes it takes a little longer to onboard the suppliers for that very reason, that Payment Works actually is doing the background checks and making sure that the bank information that they're provided is a legitimate account information, that the people that they have listed on their onboarding are actually legitimate, people in the company. So they do a lot of background checks on the companies that we are onboarding now. So maybe if this person was onboarded or this company was onboarded after Works was introduced last year, I would say we need to raise that so that Works can see if they can tighten their processes on how they validate and verify the suppliers before we onboard them.
Thank you.
It was recent. Okay,
Yeah.
then we should definitely, this is where, working collaboratively with the departments is very helpful. That you bring it up to say, hey, can we make sure that this is legitimate and there is nothing fishy going on with this supplier? Because we don't want those suppliers in our system for sure.
Yes, and I really appreciate that. And, I think that also because I've been here over 20 years, it allows me the ability to be more proactive and inquire further and feel comfortable in doing that. But yeah, definitely to me, it felt like, wait, something's not right here, because it wasn't even a company that was processing their invoices. And they said it was a company that was sending out the product that had been secured for a presentation. And to me, that seemed odd.
Right. Yeah, no, most definitely. Yeah, we want to make sure that, because see, one of the challenges we have, and this is an honest opinion from me coming from the private sector, one of the biggest weaknesses that UCI, and I would suspect that all UCs have, is we do not have a very robust supplier selection and onboarding process. We tend not to do the due diligence, making sure the suppliers have the right qualifications, the service levels, the capabilities and capacity to actually meet our needs, which is something that I'm very familiar with and used to from my prior experiences. At UCI, anybody can request to onboard any supplier, and there is no checks and balances in place to validate and make sure that the supplier is a reliable supplier. So that's a weakness in the system, but I haven't taken up that challenge yet for the reasons you mentioned yourself. So thank you very much for recognizing and appreciating that the campus is growing, the enrollments are growing, the schools are increasing, and our teams stagnant or in fact shrunk from the time I joined. So the team's doing an awesome job of managing with who we have and the staff we have. In fact, we currently are short-staffed with needing to recruit 4 people on our team. So we are even short-staffed right now, and the team's just trying their best to keep up with all the demands of the campus. So if you are not getting responses from me or my team at this time, please accept our apologies, because we are understaffed and overworked at the present time. So I want to apologize up front to the rest of the teams.
I had another question come in on the private chat. I'm wondering if you can talk about the insurance form that needs to be filled out for a service coming to campus like musicians.
Can you repeat that, Doreen?
So it's the insurance form that needs to be filled out if a service like a musician is coming to campus.
So I thought that we had simplified that process. And if we had somebody who is just coming on to perform at one of the events, and it's a low risk purchase, we are processing those on a PO. And for those individuals, I thought we were not expecting them to provide their insurance certificates. And this is, Andrew, this is before your time, but
There is the classification worksheet for artists, performers under $2,000.
Right.
I'm not sure though is that the insurance form that the question is asking about? Because that's more just informational for you to work through, not necessarily related to insurance.
She says yes.
Okay, then it's not an insurance document. Yeah. if you want more clarification, you can and want to reach out to Andrew independently, please feel free to do that. Or unless you got the answer that you're looking for.
Wouldn't that be taken care of at the vendor onboarding stage?
Yes and no. I don't know if we are collecting certificates of insurance every time we onboard the supplier. So that's why it may not be getting taken care of.
Snehal, my understanding is that it is encouraged, but I don't think it's like a full stop if they don't provide it.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Although, according to the policy, they are supposed to provide.
Right, exactly.
So,
and then also, Snehal, in regards to insurance questions as well, we work hand in hand with the section that used to be with us, risk management. So that's Christopher Richmond's group. As well, who can kind of look into insurance issues for us. Okay.
Yep, true. Thank you, Shauna.
I don't have any other questions in the chat. If anyone has a question, feel free to unmute yourself or go ahead and type it into the chat.
If not, I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank each and every one of you for taking time from your busy schedules to attend this session. I hope it was helpful, informative, and worth your time. If you ever have any questions or suggestions, please do not hesitate to send them to us. You can always send it to procurement.uci.edu, and we will look into it and try to help you the best we can. And with that, again,
I got one more question. It just came into the private chat.
Okay.
So I have a non-sales and service question. We had set up a purchase order for an NIH grant subaward. Our NIH grant is for 5 years, but NIH only releases funding to us on an annual basis. Accordingly, we release funding to our sub-awardees on an annual basis once we receive our funding from NIH. We recently paid invoices for the prior year of a subaward. Because invoices fully spent, the PO is automatically closed. Now we need to add funding for next year's subaward, but can't because the PO has closed. Do I need to set up a new PO or will procurement be able to reopen it?
Okay, so here's the thing with subawards. So technically, subawards actually do not flow through procurement services. Subawards actually flow through Office of Research and the sponsored research team. So that's number one, that procurement services does not approve or review subawards. Although to answer the question you asked, if you have a 5-year NIH grant and you are going to have annual renewals of the grant or receiving grants on an annual basis, you should not close the PO and open a new one. You should actually do a PO amend and amend the PO to add more funding because it's still for the same grant for the same services that you are receiving. You can always have the PO opened up. In fact, we get requests for that all the time where somebody says that, hey, our PO has closed, but we need to add more fund to it, or we need to reopen the PO. So you can actually have the Office of Research or whoever the contracts manager is on that PO to reopen the PO. I would also recommend that there is a section in the POs where we can actually have the end date of the PO. If it's a 5-year grant, I would suggest that you put the start and end date on the PO to be 5 years from the time the PO was opened, so that it doesn't close on you on a yearly basis. So those are the two suggestions that I would have for you to not have this PO close every time at the end of the year and to have it open. And if it gets closed, you can always have somebody open the PO for you to do an amend. just remember, if you are going to open up a PO, the way the system operates is the PO will only remain open until the Friday of that week. So no matter what day you actually open the PO of the week, on Friday evening at 8 o'clock, the system actually goes in and closes all these POs. So, keep that in mind that if you want to do a PO amendment, you want to have the PO opened and take care of it before the Friday of that week. And that will not close again on you, or otherwise you'll have to have somebody open it up again.
I have
Hope this was
another
helpful.
question that has popped up. If we're wanting to enter into an agreement and or contract with a company that is also used with other UCs, does this matter? Also, is there anything that can help simplify the process to push forward with approval?
Yes, if there is already a contract in place by the other UCs, it definitely helps expedite the process. However, I would like to caution people that just because another campus has an agreement with a supplier does not mean that you can automatically use that supplier or that agreement. There are many factors that go into play here. Number one is the services that you are asking or goods you are asking the supplier to provide the same as what the other campus had signed the agreement for? If the expense or the cost is over $100,000 on an annual basis, we need to make sure that the agreement that the other campus has put in place is competitively bid and that it follows and meets the California Public Contracts Code requirements. So there are other factors that you have to take into account when you find this contract that has already been signed by another campus. There also are situations where the other campuses may not have looked at everything as closely as we may look at, and it may not fulfill all the requirements that may be necessary to actually execute an agreement. So just because the other campus did it and they have it in place does not automatically mean that we can use it. But in many instances, it does help because they may have taken care of some of the things that we may need to take care of. So that's the caveat under which I would answer the question.
And that's all for my questions. Just a reminder to everyone, I will be emailing out a copy of this recording and all the slides by next week.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the week. Bye.